I haven't been excited for an electronic album to come out like this for a while. It's a beautiful feeling of an electronic album anticipation. Hello and welcome back to Meanwhile on the Stage, where today I'll be talking about one of the most anticipated electronic albums of this year for sure. Third studio album by a Venezuelan-born artist, experimental electronic producer Alejandro Garcia, probably more known as Arca or Arca, I guess. I remember back in 2012 the music scene, the music industry being in utter shock and pleasantly surprised by Arca's surreal production mix, floating between IDM, bass, and some sort of weird reproduction of hip-hop with a sense of pain, melancholia, sadness, and all these heartbreaking emotions. Everybody classified him as one of the most exciting new producers out there, the next big music genius on the rise. And throughout his music career, he not only defined his very own style of music making, but also transmitted a diverse vision onto the expectations for visuals and art in general, as well as showing how things like gender or sexuality and the perception of beautiful and grotesque can shift and change. This bold world viewing and music making, plus Alejandro's mysterious persona and strong stage charisma, got him in a list of producers to die for, with some of the most experimental or half experimental music artists inviting him to collaborate: Bjork, Kanye West, Frank Ocean, FK Twigs, Din Blunt, Kelela. Seeing Arca on someone's production credits, it's like Christmas morning every time. He is a genius music producer about times. Yet the most interesting and the most him is of course his solo work, especially this new self-titled. It feels like it could have been more personal for him at this moment than this album. Listening to it, I once imagined an abandoned cathedral in the middle of nowhere, and me, the listener, sitting at one of the benches inside the cathedral, and Arca being around me, floating around me, going crazy, ripping his skin, falling on his knees, crying for help, showing his darkest secrets, and also helping me to see the brighter sides of it all. It's all very theatrical, beautiful, dark, and extremely heartbreaking. Like, honestly, Arca's music always has been. Alejandro's intent on showing more personal and more intimate is evident on everything connected to this release. The amazing, unsettling cover art for this album, where we can even see the pores of his skin. The promo photographs for this release with him completely naked, just with his fashionable boots and a little bit of clay. The beautifully shot and edited music videos like REVERIE, where he's presented as a wounded matador, eventually dying, I guess, or ANOCHE, with him moving among naked morphing bodies and the camera always kind of catching the worst possible shots. It is very fucked up, yet still beautiful. I mean, even the fact that now Arca sings, think widely discussed by each and every one, is him pouring his soul out there and opening as much as we never were allowed to see him do before in his art. And the way he presents and uses his voice on this record, the way vocals add vulnerability and whole another layer of this cathartic effect is just perfect, even though his vocals aren't the most powerful ones. He even said, it's like a bullfight, you're watching emotional violence for pleasure. And now hearing him sing, it feels like it was always this one thing missing upon the industrial noise and weird glitching of his music. Though it doesn't mean that any of his previous releases were bad, or, I mean, even on this album there are some great instrumental tracks. Talking more personal and vulnerable, Arca chooses to sing in his native Spanish, which to me, a person who studied languages, español incluido, linguistics and the way people's minds work when we talk, I can see why. I mean, for a lot of people, including myself, I think it's much more easy to talk about personal stuff in foreign language, like English for example. It feels like a mask edit to simplify or maybe to hide something. So for an artist who speaks good English, preferring to write lyrics and to sing in his native tongue could be very challenging and almost therapeutic. Plus, in this very particular case, Spanish is a very melodic language and quite intimate on its own. At some points of the album, you can feel as if Alejandro's standing real close to you and almost whispering in your ear, quite an uncomfortable feeling, as if you're both forced to get closer and see under each other's skin. Challenging himself even more, Arca gets inspiration in tonadas, traditional Venezuelan tonal songs. And comparing some of the songs from the album to it, you can clearly hear the influence. And of course, tonadas reflect on longing and love and suffering, perfect for Arca's vision. You can tell I was pretty fascinated by it all, and I mean, if you're still not convinced about the nakedness of this record, you can also look up the lyrics translation. It's pretty clear and transparent, themes of, again, love, longing, suffering, transcendence, everything that bothers humans, everything that we're trying to keep as close as possible. The opening track and the very first single from this album, PIEL, includes everything that I've already mentioned, the very new and unusual for Arca's music, falsetto, the Catholic-like spacious ambient instrumental. It lures you into the relaxed feeling of peace, yet you always hear the eerie bass and distortion behind. It bears you down into the beautiful sadness of this record, the romantic melancholy with the voice layered beneath as in prayer or in a lullaby. The track both feels very different from Arca's previous stuff, yet still very much like Arca's song. And I personally think it deserves a round of applause. He manages to grow out of himself, yet stay in his very own artistic lane. The sad piano-led ballad, Anoche, brings out some choir boy-like pureness to this album, and it's pretty ironic considering the visuals for this particular song. Watch the music video, it is quite unsettling and very sexual. Vocally does remind me of Anani, who I incredibly love after her last year's LP. The soundscape of this track is much more familiar with classic Arca touch, yet it's not too loud or too overwhelming. It's just kind of there in a corner, reaching out just a little bit. And this instrumental abuse grows bigger on the next track, SAUNTER. Love that track. It has this abrasive scattered noises and distorted melodies, Arca almost crying out for help. And from there it kind of develops even more on some of the tracks, like on a beautiful Reverie with shuffle and percussion and synths, with dissonant backdrops and almost cosmic, epic feeling. This album could be quite scary if you'll dive too deep into it. Instrumental tracks in this record deserve their own talk, like my favorite be Castration, probably. The coherency highlight, perfectly picturing the contrasts of this record, with yet again chopped noises, sweet piano melody, and off-putting techno cuts. It's quite hard to put yourself in the middle of this track, as it's too racing, it's too confusing, it runs all around you, and it's really hard to concentrate on everything. Weep is another quite interesting instrumental, very short track, with extremely sonically graphic lashing and robotesque background. The beat coming off that is so weird and so yet again off-putting, especially trying not to picture, but you can't do anything about it. You still picture it and mix it with all of the visuals Arca provided you with, as in matador slash bullfight slash suffering contexts. It's pretty brutal, especially considering that just before that carnage, there's the most peaceful and the most simple cornaje, and I think it fully focuses on the vocal performance and vocal charisma. And the intensity of it is real, y'all. Quite theatrical and easy to imagine confusing to some people. At one point on the track, I believe you can hear him crying and moaning, and then whispering and being really quiet. And it's all with this very simple instrumental kind of floating behind and just providing the bass. Another quieter, simpler track, very eerie toned, is Sin Rumbo, with heavy strings augment, static glitching, some electronic samples, and overall breathing, heavy, meditative, ambient darkness. genius. It all beautifully corresponds with Arca's great vocal delivery and my personal favorite lyrics on the whole record. Finally, I have to focus on DESAFIO, probably the most easygoing and the most listener-friendly, pop-friendly track. With its Euro-invaded-like beginning, I remember hearing this track for the first time, and I was like, I wouldn't be surprised to hear a big, fat bass drop here. But I mean, it's Arca, he would never do that to his music. DESAFIO, even though it's the only one usually structured, and the only one clearly represented, is still this glorious mix of visceral synth lines and heavy, breathy vocals, where we can go through dancing and having fun, and then suffering and total anguish. I think it's the perfect dark dance music the clubs need to start using more. Arca is the most forward-thinking electronic musicians out there right now, and with every release he explores more and shows us more of himself, which is always interesting, especially with such darkened, secretive persona presences. His self-titled third studio album is not that mutant or xenophone or alien or whatever, as perhaps some of his previous releases. Now he shifted his music making onto the human side. And everything that is on this record comes from right underneath the mind and the skin. I personally love it, and I think it's his most ambitious, powerful, and emotional record to date. What are your thoughts about this album? What's your favorite track? And how do you personally feel trying to put yourself inside of it? I think it really could get uncomfortable and scary for some people, and yet also quite peaceful and quiet, and I absolutely love the fact that it challenges the listener. We are waiting for your comments down below, and also don't forget to like and to share this video and to subscribe to our channel for more album reviews and for more videos about music. Happy nightmares living amongst the dead dance parties. En todo el amor para Español and para Venezuela and para Arca. He's amazing. Peace off.